Our Fantasy Bingo is back for another year, and I'm going to try to do a blackout again for my third year in a row. Here is my TBR, my list of hopefuls for things that I'm hoping to read that fit the prompts on this board, and also a few recommendations if you're stuck on some of these squares. I figured I'd help you out. Our Fantasy Bingo is a bingo board hosted on Reddit about reading speculative fiction. On April 1st every single year, you get a bingo board, and you have till March 31st to complete it, and there are a bunch of prompts for you to fill out. You can just do a regular bingo a line, or like me, you can go for a blackout. There are also levels to Our Fantasy Bingo to make it harder or easier on you, which I really enjoy. Essentially, there are two modes that you can do if you don't want to just do the regular bingo board. There is hero mode, which means that you review every single book in some place, some format. I always hit hero mode since I do review pretty much everything I read here on BookTube. And then there's also hard mode, which is an extra prompt added to the prompt of that square. Hero mode and hard mode are not required in order to participate in this, but I do think they add a fun level. I always try to go for a blackout of hard mode, so every book on this list will hit hard mode unless I say otherwise. A few other rules: you can sub out one square with a previous square, so if there's a square you really don't like, you can make it work. You can only use one book per author. The idea behind Our Fantasy Bingo was to broaden your reading, to try some things that are new, so just reading the same author over and over again kind of goes against that point. Also, you can read novellas and short stories for it, but they say to only read, I think, a little bit. I don't know what the exact ruling is on it, but I believe it's a few of them can be, but try not to make all of them. But at the end of the day, it's for yourself, and I feel like if you think it counts, count it. If you don't. That's the rule I live by when doing reading things. If you participated last year, I feel like last year was one of the hardest boards. This is my board right here. I definitely stretched a few things, but it worked for me. This year's board looks something like this, and I'm really excited for this year's board. I feel like there's a lot of fun prompts, a lot of prompts I haven't seen from them before, and I think it's going to be hard, but I'm also really excited for this one. But there are a few that I'm very stuck on. The first prompt is to read a first book in a series, which as a series reader, I find this pretty easy. The hard mode is to read a series that is more than 3 books, which does make it a little bit trickier, as I do prefer trilogies. However, I believe both of these are on my TBR and fit that square. So we have Lady of Darkness by Melissa K. Rowich. I think this is 4 books long. I could be wrong. It might be 5, which would still work for me. And also The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I know this is definitely more than 3 books. I'm really interested in reading both of these this year. Lady of Darkness, I think I will for sure get to, so I think this is my official spot on the square. But my TBR for Our Fantasy is always a bit of a mood read. I just put things that I think would fit and that are hopefuls for me, and I change it as the year goes, because sometimes books just slip in that fit really perfectly for a prompt, and sometimes I read a book and I'm like, wait, that doesn't fit that prompt. A few recommendations from me to you for this square are Blood Mercy, definitely more than 3 books long, and Blood and Steel, which is 4 books long, as well as A Court This Cruel and Lovely, that is also a 4-book long series. The second square is alliterative title, which is the title has at least 2 words that start with the same letter. Hard mode is 3 words start with the same letter. Hard mode was hard, okay. I did not think I had a book for this. I can find so many with 2. If I wasn't doing hard mode, this was probably the easiest prompt for me, but 3 was so hard until I remembered about this book. A Ship of Smoke and Steel by Django Wexler. Ship, smoke, steel. Perfect. So it hits hard mode for me. I cannot think of another one besides The Lies of Loch Lamora, but if you know more that have 3 words that start with the same letter in the title, let me know. I would really like to have more options for this square, and it always helps, I think, in the comments anytime you have a recommendation for a square to leave them down below, because it helps if other people are looking for recommendations, they can scroll through the comments. But yeah, I think I will get to this book this year, but options are always good in my opinion. I have no recommendations for you for hard mode, sorry. The next square is Under the Surface. So this is a setting that happens under the surface of the earth in some way, and for hard mode, 50% at least of the book takes place in that setting. So a lot of the examples were caves or water, under the water. I think I'm going to be going for Flames of Mira for this square. I saw this listed in the recommendation list on Our Fantasy. I don't know a lot about this book, but I believe it happens in a gigantic hole. That sounds intriguing to me. If I don't get to that, there's also A Duet with the Siren Duke by Elise Kova, which happens, I think, underwater. so that would count. And that's a fantasy romance that I'm interested in. I believe she gets like whisked away by a siren and goes to live in like the underworld city and learns about its magic. I actually have a few recommendations for this. I think I love books with this type of setting. So if you know any more, please let me know down in the comments below, because I'm really intrigued in reading more books that happen underground. The Girl in the Stars by Mark Lawrence. This first book happens under the ice. You're definitely underground. Along the Razor's Edge by Rob J. Hayes. This happens in an underground prison. It's like a pit dug deep, deep, deep underneath the earth. Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant and From Below by Darcy Coates both have scenes that happen underwater. From Below, definitely 50%. Into the Drowning Deep might be hit or miss if it hits hard mode. And also the Wool trilogy by Hugh Howey happens in silos that are underneath the ground as well, so that one would also count. The next prompt is Criminals. And the hard mode is that it features a heist. I think Criminals would be very easy, but I've been struggling a little bit with this heist aspect. For some reason, I thought a Tog book could have a heist, and Selena is an assassin, so I feel like she counts as a criminal. I've gotten mixed thoughts of whether it has a heist or not, but someone did say Kingdom of Ash might have that. I'm reading the entire Tog series this year anyways, so if one does have a heist, I probably will count it. However, The Darkness Before Them definitely has a heist in it as well, and I want to read this. It's about a talented thief as she's pursuing one big score that will settle the debt that destroyed her family. Kat's not a hero, she just wants to be free. I think this also fits the square quite well for hard mode. For recommendations from me, Fear the Flames definitely has a heist. Six of Crows has a heist. Mistborn has a heist, and Foundryside has a heist. The next square is Dreams. This is main character experiences dreams of some sort, and the hard mode for this is that they're not magical dreams. Honestly, I'm kind of at a standstill for this prompt. This is a pretty big trope in fantasy romance of like one of our MCs having a bad dream and the other one like waking them and then like knife to the throat. So I do think it'll come up at some point, but like who knows if a book just has dreams. Like I feel like I can't just Google what books have non-magical dreams but are fantasy. It just didn't come up. I saw one user recommend the Dragonbone chair, so maybe this. But other than that, I think I'm just gonna have to keep reading Fanro, and when one comes up, put it in this square. I do know this series, specifically the second book, I can't remember if it happens in the first book, has dreams. There are magical dreams in this, but there are also just plain dreams. Like, there is a scene where they're just having a plain nightmare, so I think it counts. Oh, and Duet with the Vampire King by Elise Kova has magical dreams in it. So it won't hit hard mode, but it definitely has dreams in it. The next one is Entitled Animal, which essentially means animal in the title, and the hard mode is a magical, mystical, sci-fi creature. I read a lot of dragon books, so this was kind of easy to find a book with a dragon in the title for hard mode. But there's also books like Six of Crows, Serpent in the Wings of Night, Flame and Sparrow. Those all have like a regular animal in them, but I went dragon specifically for a magical animal. And I'm picking Dragon Rider by Taran Matthew. This comes out this month. I'm really excited for it. It sounds really, really good. That's what I'm reading. I also did think about putting To Shape a Dragon's Breath on this, but it's on this list later. It worked really well for a different square. And a recommendation from me is Rated Dragons. The next square is Bard. The protagonist is a bard, a musician, a poet, or a storyteller. And the hard mode for this is explicitly called a bard. This is so hard. This is my struggle square for sure, so I need all the recommendations I can get. I currently have Darkwater Daughter down for this square. I know it doesn't hit hard mode, which sucks. I want to hit hard mode for all of them. There's like musical magic in this, so I feel like it has to count. The Long Price Quartet, they're called poets. I don't think they're actually a poet though, so I don't know if that fits the square, but this could be something on there. But I don't know a single book that calls them a bard besides Wheel of Time, maybe? And I'm not going back to that. I DNF'd that series and I'm very happily probably never going back. So if you have any recommendations for the square, please let me know. Put them down below. I really need it, and I'm sure other people do. I feel like this is a hard square. Next up is Prologue, Epilogue. For this square, a book has to have either a prologue or an epilogue, and the hard mode is it has to have both. I read stories that pretty much mainly have prologues in them. That's an easy one for me. Both was interesting because I feel like typically the end of a series has an epilogue and the start of a series has a prologue, so somewhat hard. I looked and Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole has both, so this is what I'm counting. I'm excited for this. It's a fantasy romance. For a recommendation from me, Red Sister has a prologue and an epilogue. One of my favorite books, so you should definitely read it. Other than that, I don't know, I didn't want to check every single book. I really lucked out, and Spark of the Everflame was like the first book I picked up because I was like, wait, I think it has one. The next square is a self-pubbed or indie book, and the hard mode for this is that it has under 100 ratings on Goodreads at the time of you reading it. This is a square that I always fill in as I go. I'm a judge for SBFBO. A book always fits that that I read in Spiffbo. Like, they are so underrated, the ones being put into there. Almost all of them probably fit this for me. So I'm not really worried about putting a book in this square, but I do have some recommendations for you. Blood of the Lion by C.D. McKenna has under 100 ratings currently at the time of me filming this, and I really enjoyed this one. It is like epic fantasy if you like a long epic tale. Master of the Void, which was my finalist pick this year in Spiffbo 9, also has less than 100 ratings in it currently. This might change, so maybe read it soon. The next square is Romantasy, a book where romance is a main plot. And the hard mode for this is that the protagonist is LGBTQIA+. I'm actually sad that I'm struggling with this. I think Romantasy is lacking diversity quite a bit, so it was very hard for me to find a book, and I'm not sure I have found one yet. I saw Feybound recommended, so I put that one down. I don't know if it is, so I think I'd have to read it and find out. I guess I shouldn't say that Romantasy as a whole is lacking it, but I feel like the Romantasy that I typically read, less smut, more plot, enemies to lovers, fantasy-driven Romantasy is, so I am really looking for specifically that, because I know there's a lot of male, female smut books out there, and I just want a little bit more than just erotica. So I'm definitely looking for recommendations, and I think it's sad that I'm struggling with this, so I need them because I would like to read more of them. My recommendation for you is Small Miracles by Olivia Atwater. Romance is a pretty heavy plot in this, in my opinion. Would I call it romantasy necessarily? I don't know. But romance is a pretty heavy plot, and it definitely fits into LGBTQIA+ main character, and I really enjoyed this one. The next is Dark Academia, or a book that fits the Dark Academia theme, has a school setting, something like that. This one I feel like is really up to interpretation because what does Dark Academia really mean? And I feel like in their description, they also just counted a school setting as Dark Academia. The hard mode is the school is mundane. I have 2 books on my list for this. The Storm Beneath the World. This has 2 assassin school settings. I'm really intrigued by it. Esme just recommended it to me, and I'm really excited to read this. I believe it comes out this month. And then I also have Blood Over Bright Haven, which I haven't read yet, and I know does fit Dark Academia quite well. So those are the 2 on my list. My recommendation for you is the Scalaman series. Although it does not fit hard mode, the school is definitely not mundane. It's actually out to kill them. But I really enjoyed the series. I think it's a lot of fun. The next is multi-POV, and the hard mode is at least 5 POVs. This was hard for me. I feel like the books that have a lot of POVs are very epic fantasy, classic fantasy style, and not necessarily my take. I definitely prefer a 3 POV, constantly switching, so hard mode is hard. I would like some recommendations, but I have a few on my list that I think will maybe fit it. Again, this one's hard because without someone having read it and telling me, or without me like flipping through and maybe spoiling myself, I can't really tell. So I just have a few books that I think would fit that, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, I think some of the later Throne of Glass books might have 5 POVs in them. I'm not sure. Someone said Kingdom of Ash again. The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. I think this series, maybe not in the first book, but in the second book, might have more POVs. And I think Sons of Darkness by Gaurav Mohanty also has 5 or more POVs, and I do really want to read this because my edition is stunning. Next is Pubbed in 2024, and the hard mode for this is Debut. I just got sent an ARC actually for a fantasy romance called The Rose in the Shadows, so that's what I'm putting on. I don't really know a lot about it, but I'm really excited about it. The author was really excited to send it to me, and I think it sounded really interesting, so I do know it is Debut, and it is being pubbed this month. What good timing for this to end up in my inbox. Next is a character with a disability, and the hard mode for this is the character is the main character. I, like everyone else in this world, fell to the Fourth Wing hype, so for this I will be reading Onyx Storm, which comes out next January, and it is the 3rd book in this series. Violet has a chronic disorder, definitely has some disability rep in it. So my recommendation from you is Fourth Wing or Iron Flame. However, one of my favorite horrors, The Nestlings, also has some disability rep. Our main character has lost feeling in her legs and is in a wheelchair. I really loved this one. It would definitely count. Ascendant by Michael R. Miller has a blind dragon. And Half a King by Joe Abercrombie, our main character is missing an arm, and I also really enjoyed that one. Next is Pubbed in the 1990s, and the hard mode for this is that the author has published something in the last 5 years. Also kind of finding this hard because I don't love classic fantasy, so I'm putting the Dragonbone Chair sequel on this. This one was not published in the 90s, it was published in the 80s, but the second book was published in 1990, so I'm hoping I like this and continue to the second book, and then I can count that because Tad Williams is still publishing things. But I also would love recommendations for this that aren't classic fantasy. My recommendation for you is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. I really loved this book. I wasn't expecting it to work for me. It's really atmospheric and beautiful, and it's hard hitting. There are definitely some trigger warnings in this, so look them up. And I know the author is still pubbing. Also, Good old Robin Hobb back here. She does pub a few short stories these days, so I think she would still count as hard mode, but that's kind of up to your own interpretation. Oh, next up is a dreaded square for me that I am really struggling with, and I think I'm going to continue to struggle with. A book featuring orcs, trolls, or goblins, and the hard mode is the main character. If I wasn't going for hard mode, I would put the sequel to A Crown of Oaths and Curses in here because there's a goblin king in this book, but he's definitely not a main character. I'm kind of hoping that maybe he becomes a main character and then I would be able to count this. But if you're not doing hard mode, this is a wreck for you. But I'm most definitely struggling. I do own the Grey Bastards, which is half orcs, but I'm not 100% certain I'm going to love this. So this is what's on it so far, but I need some recommendations. I think that this might need to be my replacement square this year, which I normally replace the book club read-along one, so I might just have to try really hard to participate in that one for hard mode. If I DNF this book, I definitely don't think I can do it unless someone gets me the perfect recommendation down below. So please let me know some options. I was thinking maybe a good goblin fanro could work. I don't know. The next square is space opera. Of course, this square came the year I'm like, I don't think I like space operas and I should really stop trying them. Well, I guess the world says no, Cassie, you still need to try them. The hard mode for this is written by an author who's been marginalized for some reason, whether that's race or gender or etc. I have two options for this. Blighted Stars by Megan E. O'Keefe I do own, so I should probably put it on this list. I've tried another book from Megan. I enjoyed it. But I also was thinking maybe Navigating the Stars by Maria V. Snyder. This is a YA sci-fi. I typically like YA better. I don't know if it hits space opera. I think I'd have to read it to like really figure it out. But from the synopsis, I think that it could, maybe. I also still own Leviathan Wakes, so I could try that for a third time. I have no recommendations for you for this square because I don't think I like space operas, so I'm not the right person to give you recs. The next is an author of color, and the hard mode is a debut in the last 5 years. I'm putting To Shape a Dragon's Breath on this. I believe it fits hard mode. I believe it's a debut. I think it came out last year, and I believe that our author is Indigenous. I'm reading this month, and so this one will be an easy square for me. It just like happened to work really well with this square. Next is a survival story. Now, they left this term really loosey-goosey, and there's a lot of things that I think would fit into what they're calling survival. I have put Ghost Station, which is a horror book about surviving on a alien planet, I believe, as well as Battle Royale, which is kind of like the Hunger Games before Hunger Games, on my TBR for this. The hard mode, by the way, is no super viruses or pandemics. My recommendations for you: Serpent of the Wings of Night. She's trying to survive in a world of vampires. She's literally in a competition where she has to kill people to survive. Also, the Hunger Games, similar idea, competition trying to survive. Powerless. Same thing, there's a competition where people are dying and they're trying to survive. But I also think most dystopians would work as well. The next square is to judge a book by its cover, and the hard mode is to literally not read the synopsis, nothing. I don't have a book on my TBR for this currently, so I'm gonna have to do this at some point during the year, and it's just gonna happen naturally. I have no recs for you. I feel like this matters in what you like as a cover, so I don't want to sway you for a book. Next is a small town setting, and the hard mode for this is that it's set in our world, which I think is where horror will shine. For this, I've put down the Darcy Coates Where He Can't Find You. I do think that I read a lot of horror that are kind of set in a small town set in our world. I do think this will be one that I check off as I go. I think something I read will work for this square, but I do know Where He Can't Find You works, and I do want to read that this year. My recommendation for you is Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. This is about a small town cult. Really enjoyed this one. Also, the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, another one I really loved. Next up, we have 5 SFF short stories, and the hard mode is to read an entire anthology. I own both of these, Goblin and Small Horror, so I'll probably get to one of these, but this is another square that I just feel like stumbles upon me at some point during a 48-hour readathon, a 72-hour readathon. I end up reading a short story collection. I'm not really a big fan of this square. I don't love short story collections, even though I own a few, but it's on it every year. Next up, we have Eldritch Creatures. This is essentially a book that has a scary, weird, not from this world creature in it. And the hard mode is essentially not created by Lovecraft, I think. That's what it means. I could be wrong. I'm putting the new Rob J. Hayes on this, Harold. I find Rob J. Hayes likes to pull inspiration and have eldritch horrors in his stories, so I'm just assuming that Harold will also have them. So Along the Razor's Edge would be a recommendation from me to you. This definitely fits the square. The Ninth Reign series by Jen Williams, another one that I loved that I would recommend. And Ash to the Sun by Django Wexler also really fits the square. I think maybe Into the Drowning Deep could fit it as well. Killer Mermaids. They're out of this world. And then we have reference material, and the hard mode is that it has multiple. This means that there's things like maps, glossary, pronunciation guides within the book. I think that this is also very easy. Most of my books have maps and glossaries and pronunciation guides in them. I saw recommendations for The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is one that I'm really interested in, as well as How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying by Django Wexler. The Bloodstones by Tori Tekken, I just literally remembered that this does count for hard mode as well. I really liked this one. It has a map, glossary of like the character families, and it has a pronunciation guide. This one really would hit hard mode for you. And the last square is book club or read along, and the hard mode for this is a current selection and that you participate in the conversation. Again, I don't put anything down for this. This is typically the square I replace, but I think orcs will need to be that this year. So I'm gonna have to just pay more attention to what they're reading every single month. I wish that they planned more in advance because of this square. It's just like hard for me to always remember to go look on it. I'm not really an active Reddit user. I really only use it for Our Fantasy Bingo. I love Our Fantasy Bingo, but I'm just going to do better this year. I'm really, really, really excited for this year. I think that there's some fun prompts. Let me know down below if you have any recommendations for any of these squares, if you're participating, what thing you're struggling with, and then other people can come like reply to it and say, this is a recommendation if you're struggling with a square. If you're looking to continue watching some recommendation videos from me, I will leave this one on the screen right here for you. If you'd like to leave me an emoji just to say you were here, leave me a penguin emoji, and have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day.